Hey everybody, this video is all about making your combat as deadly as possible in D&D 5th edition. I wanted to see how I could make combat as deadly as possible for my players without having to resort to just throwing a really big monster or lots of monsters at them, sort of regardless of whatever level they're at or the challenge rating of the creatures. And what I came up with is almost entirely from the variant rules in the DMG. So let's take a look. I'll talk more about this at the very end, but real quickly, just let me say, I don't think that you should do these things, or certainly not all of these things, but sort of as a thought experiment, how could I make things really tough? The first thing that I would have you implement is the optional rule of natural healing. Now, this is going to slow things down, how quickly they can heal from the combat that they just had. So with natural healing, your players will only recover hit dice after a long rest. They don't just magically go back to perfect condition because they had a good night's sleep. So, we look at messing with that meta mechanic of the game. They only get to roll hit dice after that long rest. And as far as what a long rest counts as, well, that's the next rule that I'll have you implement. The optional rule, gritty realism, definitely makes things more difficult and makes the wounds last longer, and it can make the outcome of combat much deadlier, a deadlier game. With gritty realism, you only get the benefits of a short rest after an 8-hour sleep, and you don't get a long rest until an entire week, 7 days, has gone by. This has a lot of implications for your spellcasters as well as the damage that's sticking around for a long time. So keep that in mind. Fewer spells and lingering wounds, it's going to make things a lot deadlier. Speaking of lingering wounds, lingering injuries is another of the optional rules. With this option in place, your characters suffer an ongoing injury after they receive a critical hit or after some things that happen with their death saving throws. And there's a pretty cool table that's in here, as well as I think you could easily make up some of your own lingering injuries. It's everything from a nasty scar that lowers their charisma bonuses to internal bleeding that can damage them on a failed saving throw every time they attack. Now, the book does say that a restoration spell can clear these things up, but I think that there's a lot of mechanically dangerous things, as well as some pretty cool role-playing opportunities with this rule. And the last optional rule that I would have you put into place, and you can definitely stack all of these together, is massive damage. Massive damage is the rule that whenever anyone takes half or more of their total hit points, they have to make a constitution check. And if they fail that, there's a list of different things that can happen to them. Everything from the fact that they simply lose that turn because they're stunned, to the fact that they might drop dead then and there. So yeah, you take 15 points of damage and you only have 30 hit points total. That's a Constitution save. And I believe it's a DC of 15, which isn't super easy to pass. Personally, I like to put that DC at 10, but hey, this isn't about making things easy. It's about making it as hard as possible, so leave it at 15. A big thanks to all of our patrons, but especially to Tucker. If you like what we do here and you want to be a direct part of making this happen, then head over to patreon.com/rollforinitiative and check out the perks of being a patron. The next way to really up the damage, and a lot of deadly combat is all about getting over the fact of the high hit point totals that come up as your characters progress, is taking the critical hit rule for monsters. So in the DMG on page 248, it actually says that monsters are supposed to roll crits by taking their max average damage and then adding their roll to that. I think if we want to make things really deadly, then anytime anyone gets a critical hit, the players or your monsters then give max damage plus the roll. All right, so if you're rolling 2d8, give them a 16 plus whatever they roll on those dice. The damage numbers are going to really start to rack up and pull down that glut of HP that your characters have, especially at higher levels. The next rule to make things deadlier is called momentum. Now, this is a homebrew rule, and it's one that I saw from Game Master Matt. Actually, the one that I would use is a slight variation on the momentum that he described. For me, momentum is the idea that you're generating that momentum with each successful hit against the players. So anytime you successfully hit, you gain advantage on the next attack against that person or anyone else. It's like that idea in a movie where, the person's hitting this person over there and that person and this one and that one and chaining all of those hits together. Game Master Matt's version of momentum is even heftier than that, so go over and check his out after you're done with this video. The next tip isn't a rule, but it's something to keep in mind, and that's you should have smarter monsters. Now, I don't mean increasing their intelligence score, I mean look at their tactics. A lot of the times, the tactics that players use seem to be a lot smarter than the tactics that monsters from the DM's control use. I mean, most of the time I see things happen, the monsters run in and they kind of pair off 1 for 1 or maybe 2 to 1. I think your monsters can be a lot smarter than that. Give them ambushes. Give them surprise rounds. I think that you can just straight up give them to them. I mean, if you've got a pack of dire wolves that have been terrorizing the countryside, those are smart hunters. Give them a surprise round. And think about it. Monsters in the wild, they're probably used to picking off the easier prey. So have 4 goblins all gang up on the mage, or whatever that monster is. It's not unreasonable that the monsters, the animals, the creatures would be able to assess the situation as well, their animal or monstrous instinct, or if they are humanoid, sentient creatures, and say, well, that person's going to go down the easiest, I'm going to take that one out first and lower their numbers. Have them set traps, have them feign, have them use their abilities well. Don't be afraid of hurting your players, because that's the name of the game here, as deadly as possible. And then lastly, for a deadly game, remember that a lot of this can come down to being a war of attrition. Make the resources scarcer in the resource management of health. If you're using gritty realism and natural healing, well, healing spells and regaining your hit points are going to be a lot slower of a process. So that resource is then managed and the hit points as a resource are much more scarce. But you can extend that to the rest of the world. Let health potions be extremely rare and expensive when and if they can find them. And as far as healers in the world, well, I mean, if you were able to cure broken bones 2 or 3 times a day just at level 1, I bet that cleric would rise through the ranks very quickly. So maybe clerics that are able to heal your players aren't a person that they're going to come across very often. They're hidden and cloistered and secluded away. All of a sudden, health potions are going away, spells are harder to use, NPCs that can heal them just aren't going to show up. Those broken bones, those gashes, and those wounds taking at least a week to heal, and maybe they don't heal all the way, plus some internal bleeding and lost an eye. That game's going to be a lot deadlier than your normal D&D session. I mentioned this at the beginning of the video. Now, I don't necessarily think that you should be using these rules. Certainly, probably shouldn't use all of them together, but they're out there, and you could. Using any of these rules is going to drastically change the feel and the tactics and the way that D&D is played, or at least the way that we think of it being played in most situations. So if you want to run this campaign, I think it's great. I would love to see that. But make sure that you're having very open and clear conversations with everybody in your group, and make sure that everybody understands what it entails and that they're buying in and they're along for the ride. Deadly combat means that there's a high likelihood that you're going to kill that party. But at the same time, a TPK means the game is over. So this is really something that I'm giving to you as options. And I've never been someone that liked the idea that the GM's job is to kill the party in order to win D&D. That's not the attitude that I have, or the attitude that I think a good DM should have either. These are just some of the options that are out there. What do you think of all of these deadly options? Have you used them? Do you like them? Or do you have your own homebrew rules to make things a little grittier and deadlier? I'd love to hear about them in the comments below. Until next time, I'm Ryan. This is Roll for Initiative. Thanks for watching. Bye. Actually, that might be good enough of a without it. Oh, I guess I can